economy worse. Has he done one thing? Has he done one thing right when it comes to the economy in this country?
Boy, that's a tough question. No, I can't think of anything, but may I answer the question that you alluded to before about whether or not 5% is too optimistic? No, there's nothing wrong without setting a goal of 5 or 10 or 15% if you have a free market economy. We're trying to unwind a Keynesian bubble that's been going on for 70 years, and you're not going to touch this problem until you liquidate the bad debt and the malinvestment, go back to work, but you have to have sound money. You have to recognize how we got into trouble. We got into trouble because we had a financial bubble, and it's caused by the Federal Reserve. If you don't look at monetary policy, we will continue the trend of the last decade. We haven't developed any new jobs in the last decade. Matter of fact, we've had 30 million new people and no new jobs. It's because they don't, but people don't understand monetary policy and central economic planning. Free markets will give you 10 or 15% growth or whatever, and you will not have to turn it off because you think it's going to cause inflation. It doesn't work that way.
Thanks very much, John, and welcome to the Hancock Inn. I'm standing here with Mike Patinsky. He is a small business owner from Harrisville, New Hampshire. And, Mike, what question do you have tonight?
Well, for the candidates, I'd like to know how they plan on returning manufacturing jobs to the United States.
Congressman Paul, why don't you start with that one?
Pretty important, because everything we've done in the last 20 or 30 years, we've exported our jobs. And when you have a reserve currency of the world and you abuse it, you export money. That becomes the main export, so it goes with the money. You have to invite capital. The way you get capital into a country, you have to have a strong currency, not a weak currency. Today, it's a deliberate job of the Federal Reserve to weaken our currency. We should invite capital back. First thing is we have trillions of dollars, at least over $1 trillion of U.S. money made overseas, but it stays over there because if they bring it home, they get taxed. If you want to, we need to get the Fed to quit printing the money, and if you want capital, you have to entice those individuals to repatriate their money and take the taxes off us, set up a financial system, deregulate and de-tax, to invite people to go back to work again. But as long as we run a program of deliberately weakening our currency, our jobs will go overseas, and that is what's happened for a good many years, especially in the last decade.
But let's get to John DeStacio, the union leader. He's down here in the audience, and he has a question.
John, the federal Congressman Paul, this is for you. The federal government now assists many industries: green jobs, the auto industry, research and development, all get subsidies. Given the current state of the economy, what standards do you have, if any, for government assistance to private enterprise?
Well, there shouldn't be any government assistance to private enterprise. It's not morally correct. It's not legal. It's bad economics. It's not part of the Constitution. If you allow an economy to thrive, they'll decide how R&D works or where they invest their monies. But when the politicians get in and direct things, you get the malinvestment. They do the dumb things. They might build too many houses, and they might not direct their research to the right places. So, no, it's a fallacy to think that government and politicians and bureaucrats are smart enough to manage the economy, so it shouldn't happen.
All right, these are the Republicans, the conservative candidates. Every time you applaud, I know you're happy with the answer. You take your time away, though. Make it just about foreclosures. This is an interesting topic of discussion, especially when money is scarce and you got to start cutting. It's a question of priorities. What should the government be doing? And maybe what should the government be doing in a better economy that it can't do now that has to go? So talk about foreclosures a bit, but then tell me something. If you were president and you were dealing with it in your first few weeks, you said, I might like to do this, but I can't afford to do this. Be as specific as you can. What goes?
I would want to do much less, much sooner. The government shouldn't be involved. When you take the bankruptcies, we've been doing a whole lot. We've been propping them up. We've had the Federal Reserve buy all the illiquid assets which were worthless, stick it with the taxpayers. People who made the money when the bubble was being blown up, they're the ones who got bailed out. But you want the correction. Corrections are good. The malinvestment and the bubbles are caused by the Federal Reserve and the government, and we keep propping it up. And that's why this is going. It was predictable it would come. It's predictable it's lasted 3 years, and it's predictable as long as we do what we're doing in Washington, it's going to last another 10 years. We're doing what we did in the Depression. We are doing what the Japanese have done. You need to get the prices of houses down to clear the market, but they're trying to keep the prices up. Or actually have programs in Washington. We're stimulating housing. You need to clear clear the market, and then we can all go back to work. But what we're doing now is absolutely wrong.
Before we go and out of every break, we're doing an exercise called This or That to learn more about our candidates. The speaker had no hesitation at all. American Idol over Dancing with the Stars. Congressman Paul, BlackBerry or iPhone?
BlackBerry.
BlackBerry it is. All right, we're going to continue our conversation now. We want to bring up a very important issue you know all of you will want to weigh in on, and that is the debate about entitlements. Mr. Kane mentioned those, and specifically Medicare. Right now, I want to go down to our audience. We've got Josh McKelvin with a question.
Thanks very much, John. And I have Dr. Paul Collins, who you've been running a family practice in Manchester for how long?
27 years.
Nice work. So not surprising your question is related to health care. What's your question, sir?
Yes, sir. As a member of the baby boomer generation, I've been contributing to Medicare through payroll taxes for over 30 years. How do you propose to keep Medicare financially solvent for the next 50 years and beyond?
Let's start with Dr. Paul on this one.
Well, under today's conditions, it's not solvent and won't be solvent. You know, if you're an average couple and you paid your entire amount into Medicare, you would have put $140,000 into it. And in your lifetime, you will take out more than 3 times that much. So a little bit of arithmetic tells you it's not solvent. So we're up against the wall on that. So it can't be made solvent. It has to change. We have to have more competition in medicine. And I would think that if we don't want to cut any of the medical benefits for children or the elderly, because we have drawn so many in and got them so dependent on the government, if you want to work a transition, you have to cut a lot of money. And that's why I argue the case that this money ought to be cut out of foreign welfare and foreign militarism and corporate welfare and the military-industrial complex. Then we might have enough money to tide people over. But some revamping has to occur. What we need is competition. We need to get a chance for the people to opt out of the system. Just to talk about opting out of Obamacare, why can't we opt out of the whole system and take care of ourselves?
All right, let's continue the conversation. Governor Pawlenty, Congressman Paul, does faith have a role in these public issues, the public square, or is it a personal issue at your home and in your church?
I think faith has something to do with the character of the people who represent us. And law should have a moral fiber to it, and our leaders should. We shouldn't expect us to try to change morality. You can't teach people how to be moral. But the Constitution addresses this by saying, literally it says no theocracy, but it doesn't talk about church and state. The most important thing is the First Amendment, that Congress shall write no laws, which means Congress should never prohibit the expression of your Christian faith in a public place.
Okay, great. Let's get down. Josh McKelvin, let's continue the conversation.
Thank you. Good job. While we're on the topic,
I'll describe it this way. Are you a George W. Bush Republican, meaning a constitutional amendment to ban same-sex marriage, or a Dick Cheney Republican, who, like I believe the Congresswoman just said, says this should be made, this decision, same-sex marriage, should be a state's decision?
The federal government shouldn't be involved. I wouldn't support an amendment, but let me suggest one of the ways to solve this ongoing debate about marriage, look up the dictionary. We know what marriage is all about, but then get the government out of it. Why doesn't it go to the church, and why doesn't it go to the individuals? I think government should give us a license to get married. It should be in the church.
Let me ask you another question. The Obama administration is in the process, and Leon Panetta, as the new defense secretary, will implement essentially the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So gays will be allowed to serve openly in the military. I want to ask each of you, and again, if we can be quickly, because then we want to get to the voters' questions. If you become president of the United States, now gays are allowed to serve openly in the military. Would you leave that policy in place, or would you try to change it? Go back to Don't Ask, Don't Tell, or something else?
I would not work to overthrow it, but we have to remember rights don't come in groups. We shouldn't have gay rights. Rights come as individuals. If we wouldn't have this major debate going on, it would be behavior that would count, not the person who belongs to which group.
Leave it in place? And so, Dr. Paul, to you on this one, the question comes up, though, once they're in the country illegally, you have compassion sometimes bumps up against enforcing the law and state budget crises. A 5-year-old child of an illegal immigrant walks into an emergency room. Does the child get care?
Well, first off, we shouldn't have the mandates. We bankrupted the hospitals and the schools in Texas and other states. We shouldn't give them easy citizenship. We should think about protecting our borders rather than the borders between Iraq and Afghanistan. That doesn't make any sense to me. But on coming in, you know, there was a time when government wasn't we didn't depend on government for everything. There was a time when the Catholic Church actually looked at them.
Should they get care? Should taxpayers have to pay for that care?
No, they should not be forced to, but we shouldn't be penalizing the Catholic Church because they're trying to fulfill a role, and some of the anti-immigrants want to come down hard on the Catholic Church, and that is wrong. If we believed in our free society, matter of fact, this whole immigration problem is related to the economy. People aren't coming over as much now because it's weak. When we had a healthy economy, some of our people did work and people flowed over here getting jobs. So there is an economic issue here as well. But no, if you have an understanding and you want to believe in freedom, freedom has solved these kind of problems before. You don't have to say, oh, you're not going to have care, there won't be any care, and everybody's going to starve to death and die on the streets without medical care. That's the implication of the question. That's just not true, and you shouldn't accept it.
Mr. Kane, another issue that's come up in recent years is this debate has bubbled up.
Congressman Paul, this is for you, but John, if you don't mind, I'd also like to hear from Governor Romney and a couple of the other candidates, because it relates to a specific New Hampshire issue with a national question. Here in New Hampshire, there is a popular bill that is being considered by our state legislature that would restrict the state's power to seize private land to build a power plant or a transmission facility. Should governments at any level be able to use eminent domain for major projects that will reduce America's dependence on foreign oil?
No, we shouldn't have that power given to the government where they can take private land and transfer it to a private industry. The eminent domain laws are going to vary in different states, but we have the national eminent domain laws. It was never meant to take it from some people, private owners, and then take it and give it to a corporation because it's going to help in that local locality. And this goes back to the basic understanding of property rights. Property in a free society should be owned by the people, and it shouldn't be regulated to death by the governments, whether it's Washington, D.C. or local governments. Right now, we really don't own our land. We just pay rent on our land, and we listen to all these regulations. So I would say the courts should get out of the way, too. They should not have this right to take land from individuals to provide privileges for another group.
Osama bin Laden is dead. We've been in Afghanistan for 10 years. Isn't it time to bring our combat troops home from Afghanistan?
You know, I served 5 years in the military. I've had a little experience. I've spent a little bit of time over in the Pakistan, Afghanistan area, as well as in Iran. But I wouldn't wait for my generals. I'm the commander-in-chief. I make the decisions. I tell the generals what to do, and I'd bring them home as quickly as possible, and I'd get them out of Iraq as well, and I wouldn't start a war in Libya. I'd quit bombing Yemen, and I'd quit bombing Pakistan. I'd start taking care of people here at home because we could save hundreds of billions of dollars. Our national security is not enhanced by our presence over there. We have no purpose there. We should learn the lessons of history, and the longer we're there, the worse things are, and the more danger we're in as well, because our presence there is not making friends, let me tell you.
Congressman Paul, if you were the President of the United States and you could pick one, but just one of these gentlemen and the lady to join your administration, who would it be and why?
Join the administration?
Yes.
Oh, I would think everybody would qualify as...
You only get to pick one. It's about choices.
I have to pick one. Well, let me look them over. I would have to do a bit more quizzing. I would have to check.
Fair.
They haven't even told me how they feel about the Federal Reserve yet. They haven't told me about a non-intervention foreign policy. I'll have to do some more quizzing.
We're down to our last minute. What have you learned in the last 2 hours?
Well, I've learned that with a group here that disagrees on some issues, we can talk about it and be civil to each other.
Governor?